On April 10, 1952, a 2-year-old boy named Keith Parkkins was playing near a barn on his grandfather's cattle ranch in Ritter, Oregon. His older brothers went inside for lunch. When their mother realized Keith had not followed, she walked out to the barn. He was gone. Not hiding, not wandering the yard. Gone. The family searched immediately. They followed his tiny footprints across the snow. The prints were clear at first, small and unsteady, the kind a toddler leaves when stumbling through rough terrain. Then they stopped. In the middle of an open stretch of snow, with no tree cover, no rocks, no obstruction of any kind, the footprints simply ended. There were no animal tracks nearby, no adult prints, no drag marks, no disturbance in the snow beyond those tiny shoes. Just a trail that started at a barn and stopped in the middle of nowhere. 19 hours later, searchers found Keith Parkkins. He was lying face down on a frozen pond, unconscious but alive. His jacket was off. His clothing was ripped. He had no visible injuries. He was between 8 and 15 miles from his grandfather's ranch, depending on which account you follow, across terrain that included 2 mountain ranges, dense timberland, and snow-covered wilderness. He was 2 years old. Survival expert Les Stroud, the creator of the television series Survivor Man, later attempted to replicate the route as part of a documentary. Stroud, a grown man in peak physical condition with decades of wilderness experience, concluded that it would have taken a minimum of 19 hours of non-stop walking to cover that distance. A 2-year-old child, at night, in freezing temperatures through mountain terrain. When Keith was warmed and conscious enough to speak, they asked him what had happened. He said he did not remember. That answer, those 3 words, is what this video is about. In our first video on this subject, we told you about the 1,700 people who have vanished in and around America's national parks. We told you about the profile points, the missing scent trails, the storms that roll in within hours of a disappearance, the bodies found in locations that were searched multiple times, the shoes removed, the clothing folded, the National Park Service's refusal to keep a list. But there is another side to this phenomenon that is, in many ways, far more disturbing than the disappearances. Because some of these people came back. They were found alive. Children too young to lie. Adults too disoriented to fabricate. And when they were asked what happened, their answers were not what anyone expected. They described things that do not fit any conventional explanation. Things that search and rescue professionals, law enforcement officers, and medical doctors have been unable to account for. And they describe them with a consistency that spans decades, geography, and age. This is the part of Missing 411 that nobody talks about. Not the ones who vanished, the ones who returned. Welcome to Discovery Vault. Let's establish something first. When David Paulides began compiling cases for his Missing 411 research, he catalogued over 1,100 individuals. Of those, roughly 270 were found alive, about 350 were found dead, and just over 500 were never found at all. The survivors represent less than a quarter of the total cases, but what makes them significant is not their number. It is the pattern in what they reported and what they could not report after being found. The single most common feature among survivors, especially children, is total memory loss. Not partial amnesia, not confusion about details, complete inability to recall anything that happened between the moment they disappeared and the moment they were found. Keith Parkkins could not explain how he crossed 2 mountain ranges. He could not explain why his jacket was off in freezing weather. He could not explain why his footprints stopped in an open field. He was 2. You might say a 2-year-old cannot be expected to articulate what happened, and that is a fair point. But the pattern holds for older children too, and for adults. In January 2019, 3-year-old Casey Hathaway was playing in his great-grandmother's backyard in Ernle, North Carolina, with 2 other children. When the children were called inside, Casey did not come. His family searched for 45 minutes before calling 911. What followed was a massive search operation involving the FBI, the United States Marine Corps from nearby Camp Lejeune, state and county law enforcement, drones, helicopters, and over 600 volunteers. They searched more than 1,000 acres. Temperatures dropped near freezing. Heavy rain and high winds battered the area for 2 straight days. For a child who weighed 25 pounds and stood 2 feet 4 inches tall, the conditions were not survivable by any reasonable medical standard. 56 hours after he disappeared, searchers received a tip. A neighbor had stepped outside to walk her dogs and heard what sounded like a child crying. Emergency responders moved toward the sound and found Casey approximately 50 yards into the woods, tangled in a thicket of briars and thorns on the far side of a creek. He was soaking wet, covered in scratches, but otherwise unharmed. He was crying for his mother. When they warmed him up and brought him to the hospital, he was treated for minor cuts and released the following day. But what Casey told his mother in the emergency room is what makes this case significant. He said he had a friend in the woods. He said his friend was a bear. He told his aunt that he hung out with a bear for 2 days. Craven County Sheriff Chip Hughes confirmed the account publicly. He told reporters that Casey made the comment unprompted and repeated it consistently to multiple people. Hughes said he took the story seriously, not because he believed a bear had literally cared for a toddler, but because something had kept that child alive through conditions that should have killed him. Bears in that region of North Carolina would have been hibernating in January. Even if one had been active, bears do not nurture human children. They are predators. A 25-pound toddler would register as food, not offspring. Now here is where the pattern becomes uncomfortable. Casey Hathaway is not the only child to describe being cared for by a large animal-like figure. David Paulides has documented multiple cases stretching back to the late 1800s in which small children found alive after inexplicable disappearances described being with a bear man, or a big hairy wolf. In one case, a young girl who disappeared from a rural area where her father worked as a lumberman was found standing on a log near a stream. When rescuers asked what happened, she said, "A big hairy wolf had me." Wolves do not carry children to streams and set them on logs. In another case, during the search for 6-year-old Dennis Martin in the Great Smoky Mountains in 1969, a family named Key reported seeing something on a hillside near the search area. The father described it as a large, wild, hairy figure moving behind trees, carrying something over its shoulder. The child in the Key family pointed to the top of the hill and said he saw a bear. The father said it did not look like a bear. It looked like a man, a wild, hairy mountain man. Dennis Martin was never found. But the Key family testimony was documented and reported to park rangers at the time. These accounts exist in a category that is almost impossible to investigate. The witnesses are too young to cross-examine. The descriptions are filtered through a child's vocabulary. A 3-year-old does not have the language to describe something unfamiliar, so they reach for the closest comparison they know. Bear, wolf, monster, hairy man. The question is not whether the children are telling the truth. The question is what they are trying to describe. But children are not the only survivors, and the adult cases are, if anything, harder to explain. On February 20th, 1978, a 23-year-old college senior named Stephen Kubacki went cross-country skiing near the shore of Lake Michigan, close to the town of Saugatuck. The next day, snowmobilers found his skis and backpack abandoned near the lake. Investigators found a trail of footprints 200 yards long in the snow, leading from his gear toward the edge of the frozen lake. The prints went in one direction only. They ended at the ice. There were no prints coming back. Search and rescue teams concluded that Kubacki had fallen through the ice and drowned. His family was notified. A memorial was held. Hope College awarded him his bachelor's degree in absentia the following spring. 15 months later, On May 5, 1979, Stephen Kubacki woke up. He was lying in a grassy field in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, 700 miles east of where he had disappeared. He was wearing clothes he did not recognize. He had a backpack he had never seen before. Inside were maps, hitchhiking signs for cities across the country, a marathon t-shirt from Wisconsin, a pair of new glasses, and $40 in cash. He had no memory of anything that had happened since the night he went skiing. 14.5 months of his life were completely blank. He found his way to his aunt's home in nearby Great Barrington. She answered the door and nearly collapsed. She thought he was dead. Everyone thought he was dead. When reporters descended, Kubacki told the same story repeatedly and consistently. He remembered feeling cold and scared on the ice, then nothing, then waking up in a field in Massachusetts. He could not account for a single day of the missing 15 months. He told a reporter he felt like he had done a lot of running. He refused to see a psychiatrist. He insisted he had been in a healthy frame of mind when he left for the skiing trip, and that he still was. The medical explanation offered was a dissociative fugue state, a rare psychiatric condition in which a person loses their identity, travels extensively, and has no memory of the episode. It is a real condition. It has been documented, but it is extraordinarily rare, and it typically involves some identifiable psychological trigger, such as severe trauma or emotional crisis. Kubacki's friends, family, and professors reported no such trigger. He was 9 credits away from graduating. He was a solid student. He had no history of mental illness. And while fugue states can account for travel and memory loss, they do not typically result in a person being presumed dead for over a year and then surfacing 700 miles away with gear suggesting continent-spanning travel that the person cannot recall. Kubacki is not the only adult case with this profile. Polydays has documented a pattern of young men, mostly in their 20s, vanishing near bodies of water and either never being found or being found under circumstances that contradict the evidence. In many of these cases, the men were last seen at bars or social gatherings, left without telling anyone, and turned up dead in water days or weeks later. But the forensic details do not add up. Coroners in several cases found that the bodies had been in the water for a significantly shorter period than the number of days the person had been missing. That means the body entered the water after the person disappeared, not at the moment of disappearance. In one case, documented in Paulides' book, A Sobering Coincidence, a 24-year-old college soccer player named Jelani Brinson disappeared from a friend's home in Anoka, Minnesota. Investigators found his hat in one backyard, his shoes in another. His body was eventually found in a golf course pond. It had been raining for days and the course was muddy, but Brinson's socks were clean. He did not walk there. Something or someone placed him in that water. These urban cases extend the missing 411 pattern beyond the wilderness and into college towns and cities, concentrated heavily in Minnesota and Wisconsin. Now here is what connects Keith Parkkins, Casey Hathaway, Stephen Kubacki, and the dozens of other cases in the missing 411 record. They were all found. They all survived, or in the urban cases, were recovered under conditions that did not match the official narrative. And the one thing that unites all of them is the absence of a coherent account. The children cannot remember. The adults cannot remember. The dead cannot speak. And the physical evidence in each case contradicts what search and rescue professionals, law enforcement, and medical examiners considered possible for the individuals involved. Let's talk about what the survivors look like when they are found, because this too follows a pattern. Children who are found alive after these disappearances are typically running a low-grade fever. They appear traumatized, but cannot articulate the source of the trauma. Their feet, even when shoes are missing, are often clean and uninjured, despite being found miles from the point of disappearance in terrain that would shred the feet of a barefoot adult. If a 3-year-old walked 8 miles through frozen timberland, their feet would be destroyed. Keith Parkkins' feet were not destroyed. Casey Hathaway had scratches from the briars he was found in, but his condition was otherwise inconsistent with a child who had been exposed to the elements for nearly 3 days without food, water, or shelter. These are not details that fit any single conventional explanation. And then there is the detail that haunts search and rescue teams the most. In case after case, survivors are found in areas that had already been searched. Not areas adjacent to the search zone, not areas that were partially covered. Areas that trained teams with dogs had walked through systematically, grid by grid, and cleared. The person was not there during the search. And then, days later, they were, as if they had been returned. This is the phenomenon that Paulides calls the missing 411 survivor profile. And it overlaps with another pattern that is equally difficult to explain, the cluster zones. Paulides has identified 63 location-based clusters across North America where these disappearances concentrate, not random scattering. Clusters. Yosemite National Park in California has the largest concentration, with 40 to 45 cases. The Great Smoky Mountains, Glacier National Park, Crater Lake in Oregon, Rocky Mountain National Park, Mount Shasta, the Sierra Nevada Range, and Mount Rainier all appear on the cluster map. To qualify as a cluster, a location must have at least 4 cases that match the profile points. Some have dozens. What makes the clusters significant is not just the number of cases, but their terrain characteristics. Paulides and other researchers have noted that cluster zones share specific terrain features: dense forest cover, proximity to water sources, rivers, lakes, streams, the presence of boulder fields or granite formations, high elevation changes within short distances, and in many cases, the presence of berry-producing plants, particularly huckleberries. That last detail sounds absurd until you realize it appears with enough frequency across cases to be statistically notable. Yosemite, the largest cluster, has abundant huckleberry growth in the areas where disappearances concentrate. The skeptical explanation for the clusters is straightforward. More people visit Yosemite and the Great Smoky Mountains than almost any other parks in the system. More visitors means more opportunities for people to get lost, injured, or killed. The parks with the highest visitation numbers should, statistically, have the highest number of disappearances. And to a degree, this is true. But the profile cases are not random lost hikers. They are cases that search and rescue teams could not explain. Cases where tracking dogs refused to track. Cases where experienced outdoorsmen vanished from marked trails in broad daylight. Cases where bodies appeared in areas that had been searched repeatedly, sometimes days or weeks after the initial search, in a state of preservation that did not match the elapsed time. Cases where the cause of death could not be determined. Cases where clothing was removed and folded neatly, something a hypothermic person in a fugue of paradoxical undressing would not do. Speaking of which, paradoxical undressing. It is the most common skeptical explanation for the clothing removal pattern, and it is a real medical phenomenon. When a person's core body temperature drops below roughly 90 degrees Fahrenheit, the muscles that constrict blood vessels near the skin can fail, causing a sudden rush of warm blood to the extremities. The person feels a wave of intense heat and, in their confused and deteriorating state, begins removing clothing. It is well documented. It is a known cause of death in hypothermia cases worldwide. But there is a critical distinction that the paradoxical undressing explanation does not address. In documented medical cases of paradoxical undressing, the clothing is removed haphazardly. Jackets are flung, shirts are pulled halfway off, boots are kicked in different directions. The person is in a state of delirium. They are not organized. They are dying. In many missing 411 cases, the clothing is folded. Shoes are placed side by side. Pants are laid flat. This is not the behavior of a person experiencing terminal hypothermia. It is the behavior of a person who deliberately removed their clothing, or the behavior of something that removed the clothing for them. And then there are the tracking dogs. In case after case, trained search and rescue canines are brought to the point of last contact, given the missing person's scent article, and set to work. These are animals bred and trained specifically for this task. They can follow a human scent trail that is days old through rain, wind, and dense vegetation. They are considered the single most effective tool in wilderness search and rescue. In missing 411 cases, the dogs fail, not occasionally, routinely. They either cannot pick up a scent at the point of last contact, which should be saturated with the missing person's scent, or they pick up the scent and then lose it suddenly in the middle of a trail, as if the person had been lifted off the ground. Dog handlers involved in these searches have described the behavior as unlike anything they have experienced. In some cases, the dogs refuse to search entirely. They sit down, they whine, they will not move forward. Handlers have described this as behavior they have never seen in trained animals and that they cannot explain. The conventional explanation is that environmental conditions can disrupt scent trails. High winds, heavy rain, and running water can disperse or destroy scent molecules. This is true. But it does not account for cases where conditions were calm and dry, or where the dog tracked a scent for a distance and then lost it instantaneously, as if a line had been drawn across the trail. So what are we left with? We have a phenomenon that spans at least a century of documented cases across North America. We have children found alive in locations that are physically impossible for them to have reached on their own, with no memory of how they got there, sometimes describing being cared for by large, hairy, animal-like figures. We have adults who disappear and reappear months later, hundreds of miles away, with no memory of the intervening time. We have bodies found in areas that were thoroughly searched, sometimes in a state that suggests they were not there during the original search. We have clothing removed in ways inconsistent with known medical phenomena. We have tracking dogs that refuse to track. We have 63 location-based clusters, and we have a federal agency that manages 85 million acres of the most heavily visited public land in the country and refuses to keep a centralized list of the people who disappear on it. The explanations range from the mundane to the extraordinary. Hypothermia, animal predation, falls into hidden crevasses, abduction by human predators, dissociative fugue states. And then, further out on the spectrum, theories involving undiscovered predatory species, electromagnetic anomalies, infrasound disorientation, and phenomena that most people are not comfortable naming in a sentence that also contains the word evidence. Paulides, to his credit, has never publicly endorsed any specific theory. He presents the cases, he identifies the patterns, and he stops. He has said repeatedly that he does not know what is happening. He has said that anyone who claims to know is not being honest. What he will say is that the data does not support the conclusion that all of these cases are explainable by conventional means. Some of them are. Many of them probably are. But not all of them. And the ones that are not, the ones where the evidence contradicts every rational scenario, are the ones that keep him working. A statistical analysis of the missing 411 dataset reveals something that deepens the mystery further. Of the over 1,100 documented cases, men disappear roughly 50% more often than women. Children and adolescents go missing at approximately twice the expected rate based on population data. The elderly are the least likely to be found at all. Young men between the ages of 18 and 24, the group you would expect to have the highest survival rate based on physical fitness and endurance, are found dead at a rate far exceeding any other age group. The people who should be the hardest to kill in the wilderness are the ones who die the most. The people who should be the easiest to kill, small children with no survival skills and no ability to regulate their own body temperature, are found alive at the highest rate. That statistical inversion does not correspond to any known model of wilderness mortality. Here is what we know for certain. People are disappearing on America's public lands at a rate that no federal agency is willing to quantify. In 2022 alone, the National Park Service recorded over 312 million recreational visits across the parks it manages, with more than 13 million overnight stays. Some of those visitors did not come home. How many exactly we do not know, because the agency tasked with managing those lands does not track the number. Survivors, when they can speak, describe experiences that do not correspond to any known natural or medical phenomenon. Children describe protectors that do not exist in any zoological record. Adults describe nothing because the memory is not there. And the physical evidence, the distances covered, the terrain crossed, the conditions survived, does not match any conventional scenario that has been proposed. The government, which maintains detailed records of every campsite reservation, every fishing license, every entrance fee paid at every gate, does not maintain a list of the people who walk through those gates and never come out. When researchers have filed Freedom of Information Act requests for specific case files, they have been denied. When they have asked for a comprehensive database, they have been told no such database exists. When they have asked how much it would cost to compile one, they have been quoted figures in the millions of dollars for a list. In our first video, we asked why. We still do not have an answer. But we have something that might be more important than the answer to that question. We have the testimony of the people who came back. A 2-year-old in Oregon who crossed 2 mountain ranges in a single night and cannot say how. A 3-year-old in North Carolina who survived freezing rain and near-freezing temperatures for 3 days and said a bear took care of him. A 23-year-old in Michigan who walked onto frozen water and woke up 15 months later in a field 700 miles away wearing someone else's clothes, with someone else's maps in someone else's backpack. They survived. They returned. And whatever happened to them in the space between vanishing and being found is locked behind a wall of silence that not one of them has been able to break. Here is what keeps researchers like Paulides working. It is not the mystery itself. Mysteries are common. What is uncommon is a mystery that produces physical evidence which contradicts every proposed solution. A 2-year-old cannot cross 2 mountain ranges, but Keith Parkkins did. A 3-year-old cannot survive 3 days of freezing exposure without shelter, but Casey Hathaway did. A man cannot disappear from a frozen lake and wake up 15 months later in a field 700 miles away with no memory, but Stephen Kubacki did. You can dismiss any one of these cases individually. You can explain away the footprints, the clothing, the distances, the memory loss, the clean feet, the silent dogs, the folded clothes. You can attribute each anomaly to a different mundane cause. Hypothermia for the clothing, fugue state for the memory, a child's imagination for the bears, search error for bodies appearing in cleared areas, environmental interference for the dogs. And for any single case, one of those explanations might be correct. But when the same anomalies appear in the same combinations across hundreds of cases, spanning more than a century, across 30 states, in 63 identified cluster zones, involving victims of every age, gender, and experience level, the coincidence explanation starts to require more faith than the mystery itself. The forest takes people. That much is fact. But the forest also gives some of them back. And the ones it gives back come with stories that are harder to dismiss than any theory, any debunking, any rational explanation offered from the safety of a building with 4 walls and a locked door. The list the government will not keep is getting longer. The ones who come back are still not talking. And the question that has defined this phenomenon for over 100 years is the same question it started with. What happens in the space between vanishing and being found? After all this time, after all these cases, no one knows. This has been Discovery Vault. If this pulled you in the way it pulled us in, subscribe and turn on notifications. There will be a part 3. The cases we have not told you about yet are worse.